This is High Tech High Unboxed. I'm Alec Patton. When I was a high school teacher, I'd often have the feeling that I had countless problems and no ideas about how to solve them. Occasionally, that was true. But more often, I actually had a different issue. Because in fact, a flood of ideas would come to me throughout the school day. Good ideas, bad ideas, tiny tweaks to help one student, and wild visions for completely overhauling my class. So my problem wasn't actually a lack of ideas. My problem was that I didn't have a way to capture my ideas, evaluate them, decide which to try, and monitor what happened once I did try them. I can't tell you the number of times I had an idea, gave it a try, and then completely forgot about it. I mean, I literally can't tell you the number of times because I wasn't tracking these ideas or these tests. I'm bringing this up because today's episode is about big, bold, transformative ideas for making schools more humane, inspiring places where everyone can learn. But in particular, it's about how educators can take those ideas and make them into reality by observing, testing, and documenting. To host this conversation, I'm excited to welcome back Stacey Caillier, Director of the National Coalition for Improvement in Education. Stacey's interviewing Cornelius Minor, who's the author of We Got This: Equity, Access, and the Quest to Be Who Our Students Need Us to Be. He's also co-founder of the Minor Collective, and he teaches middle school. Actually, he's kind of got a dream gig. He works 4 days as a teacher and instructional coach and spends 1 day a week on research and writing. Stacey has followed Cornelius' work for years, but she wanted to talk to him now because she heard him give a truly awesome keynote at this year's Learning Forward conference. And speaking of conferences, you still have time to book tickets for the National Summit on Improvement in Education and for the Deeper Learning Conference. They're both happening in San Diego from March 30th to April 1st this year in San Diego, California. If you like what you hear in this episode, you're probably going to be excited about both conferences. So we have a link to a video in the show notes that will help you figure out which conference will be best for you. Now, here's Stacey's interview with Cornelius Minor.
Cornelius, I'm so happy you are here. I've been your fan for a long time, going back to when we were starting our first literacy network. So when you delivered the keynote at this year's Learning Forward conference, the vision of education that you described felt so familiar and deeply aligned with my own. You called on all of us to be bold at a time that feels really challenging, to create schools that are life and identity affirming, rooted in possibility and curiosity, cultures where adults and young people are learning together, where we're compassionate with each other, while also being courageous about redesigning the systems that cause harm. What surprised me the most about your talk was how you talked about getting there. So without ever using the language of continuous improvement, you laid out an approach that mirrored the heart of improvement, listening deeply to those we serve, slowing down to understand the problem before jumping to solutions, testing ideas on a small scale with colleagues you trust, collecting simple data to know what's working and what's not, and then spreading what works so we can do better by more of the young people in our care. So for those of you who are listening who maybe haven't yet discovered the magic of Cornelius, let me just tell you that he is a Brooklyn-based dad, educator, and coach. He's the author of the fabulous book, We Got This, which you should definitely order if you have not read it, and the co-founder of the Minor Collective. He works with educators and communities around the world to reimagine literacy, learning, and equity by starting where it matters most, listening deeply to kids. And I reached out after that Learning Forward keynote because I wanted his brilliance to reach more people, especially those of us invested in continuous improvement and the hard, but really hopeful work of building more humane schools. So Cornelius, I'm so grateful that you are here today. That's a big, weird space. All right. Thank you. Okay, well, I want to dig in because in your keynote, you began by acknowledging the professional heartbreak that many of us as educators are experiencing right now. And I wanted you to just talk a little bit about this professional heartbreak and how you talked about how it can dull our ability to sense our own power. Can you just
Yeah.
riff on that for a little bit?
I think I'm growing a lot in life, period. So not just as an educator, but as a father, as a community member. In so many ways, I am figuring out like who I'm still becoming. I just turned 47, which is exciting. But then it presents these challenges where you think you've got it made professionally. But then, like, life throws weird things at you. My parents are aging. I just lost my dad. I've got kids who are in the throes of being like teenagers and figuring out what life is for themselves. And so all of these challenges start to show up, but then all these feelings accompany those challenges. And so I have become quite an intimate partner to joy and to excitement and to wonder and to curiosity, but also to heartbreak. And so I'm exploring the contours of heartbreak as a person. And then I'm also experiencing life as an educator in 2026. And I am beginning to recognize that those same feelings that I sometimes feel in life, I am also feeling those things professionally. And so, as a newly minted 47-year-old, I am still developing tools to really figure out what heartbreak means in life. And I realize that as a professional, I've got to build those tools as well. And so as I am building those tools, I find that it's really helpful to talk about them in public, right? We have this language for how we describe our triumph in public. We have this language for how we describe our discoveries in public, but we don't have language for how we are exploring the very real sense of heartbreak that we feel when this country is disappearing children and their families off the street. The very real sense of heartbreak that we feel when folks look at teachers and say that you are not qualified to develop your own thinking about what should be in classrooms. So we're going to sell you this thing in a box. That sense of heartbreak that we feel when communities are turning their backs on education from the funding level, from the access to books level, all of these things we're feeling, but nobody's talking about. And so I really just wanted to develop a very public facing and professional language to talk about the things that hurt, right? We talk about the things that happen, but we don't always talk about the things that hurt.
Yeah, I felt like that really landed with folks, just those words, professional heartbreak. It's like heartbreak is a really good description of what many of us are feeling right now.
Yeah,
What I really appreciated about your message was that we can feel that and we should,
yeah,
and we are powerful.
yeah,
Like we have the power to make a difference in students' lives by focusing on what matters, getting to the root of what's really going on for them.
yeah.
And so I just really appreciated that.
Thank you, thank you. And I really have loved everything that has happened. The more I talk about it, the more people volunteer their own, and then the more we can come together in community to talk about, hey, first, this is how we feel. We're going to feel the feelings. But then after we feel the feelings, or while we're feeling the feelings, we get to really be creative and do incredible work that a lot of people forget that, the twin sibling of heartbreak is creativity. And so I
Mhm.
always want to hold on to that too, that while I am profoundly devastated by some of the things that we feel in our profession and in our communities, I am also keenly like thrilled by and excited by the prospects of what we can do.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've been struck by lately is I keep hearing people, myself included, talking a lot about navigating or getting through this
Yeah,
current moment. And I just really appreciated your encouragement and invitation to instead be bold, like in your talk.
yeah,
This was a direct quote that I loved so much. You were like, boldness is innovating different approaches when something isn't working for our kids. That's one way we educators get to be bold every day. And so, what do you think boldness looks like right now? Like, what dispositions do we need to embrace as we're trying to be bold?
I actually interestingly want to start with what boldness doesn't look like. And here's
Great.
why. Yeah, like as I am a child of the 80s and I came up on all the 80s media. I was just actually talking with a friend this morning. So the Rocky movies, the Ninja Turtles, the Transformers,
Oh, yes.
right? And as I consider all of this media, I think we were sold an idea of boldness that looks nothing like us. Right. We were sold
Mm,
this very kind of masculine, this very aggressive, this very be out in front kind of boldness. And I just don't think that that's how it works most times. as an adult, I've gotten an opportunity to read and to experience like lots of different communities of people. And the boldest people I find are the mothers in our communities, or the listeners in our communities, or the healers in our communities. And so when I think about what boldness is not, it is not this idea that we've been sold that it's the person in the front calling the shots. Boldness is not the loud one or the aggressive one or the one who boasts about having the best ideas. I think boldness starts, it's the people who listen, right? Because those are the people who were most keenly aware of what's actually happening. And so if I want to be bold, for me, step one has always been like get close to my people and listen.
Mm.
And so you might enter a room and you might be looking for this very kind of stereotypical idea of boldness, but boldness is usually like bold. The bold people are the ones who are like quietly listening. And that's a real thing. When we think about research, that's the data collection. And so the person who is boldest is the person who has the most data. And you come at that data in a community by listening to other folks. But then boldness also looks like the people who are gatherers. So who are the people who are willing to extend the invitation for more people to be in the room?
Mm.
Like the gatherers want to hear from folks. The gatherers want to build alongside people. And so for me, boldness looks like, hey, Stacey, I'm having a really hard time. And I know you're in the math department and I'm in the English department, but I was wondering if you could come over and think with me for about 15 minutes during your lunch today, because I have this idea, right? That's bold. Like, like gathering.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting to me that that I can reach across departments or reach across the school or dare I say even, reach across the district, that those are really bold moves that we are kept in these like instructional and institutional silos that prevent us from being great, right? And so the gatherers, that's bold. But then also the people who are willing to reflect and revise, right? That there's no easy way forward, right? And so we're going to make mistakes. Things are going to be weird. And so I've been thinking a lot about like, what does it mean to try something, completely fail at the thing, own the failure, and then revise the thing in public? That to me feels like bold. And so people who are willing to dream big ideas in community with others and then make bold attempts. And here's the thing, that iterative design, like failure is a part of it, right? But we've taken that out of our culture, especially out of school culture, right? And so this idea of embracing iterative design and saying like, yep, I tried a thing that was really ambitious and that was version 1.0 and the thing didn't work. So here's how I am revising the thing for version, 1.1.
Yep.
And really for me and my team and for the people who are close to me, developing the language and the sense of comfort to talk that way, that's bold. And so like when I've
Yeah.
been trying to build what bold isn't me being Donatello from the Ninja Turtles, even though I want to be him. Bold bold isn't me being Optimus Prime from Transformers, even though I want to be him. Bold isn't me being She-Ra, even though I want to be her. Bold really is like being willing to listen, being willing to gather, and being willing to revise.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I love also just that boldness is being willing to make mistakes and like
Yeah,
own them and learn from them and share them. We've often joked about
yeah,
how fun would it be to have like a spectacular failures party where everybody just
yeah,
comes and shares like something that they've tried that didn't work because we learned so much
yeah.
from those those moments too. I really love that. I mean, one thing that you also talked about in your talk that I loved was you talked about like boldness is believing in kids.
Absolutely.
And that looks like innovation, flexibility, curiosity, appreciation, not just certainty and judgment. It's, learning, like being that observer, that listener, that gatherer,
Yeah.
so that we can actually see them and really show up for them. So
Exactly.
I
One of the
love
things that I'm
that.
learning from my own children is that idea that so much about being an adult is about like pretending that you're certain. And so really adopting that stance from like my own teenagers would be like, all right, like we are wildly uncertain about this thing, but we're moving forward.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure this out together. And we're moving because you feel like this is the right way to go for you. And so, as an adult in the space, to be able to look at my teenagers, to be able to look at the kids at school and to say, all right, I'm going to trust that this is the thing that's going to challenge you and grow you. And so even though it's unfamiliar to me, even though it feels strange to me, we're going to be moving in this direction. We're going to figure this out together.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
boldness is that trust that we can be in community with teenagers, we can be in community with first graders, we can be in community with like university folks, and we can trust that they know what's best for them and we can
Yeah.
work it out together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what wisdom is too, is realizing all the things that you really are not certain of, which is so much as I get older as well. I'm 49, coming on 50, and I'm like, dang, I'm less certain than I ever was.
Yeah,
But that's not
yeah.
bad. So I wanted to talk about a story that you shared in your keynote that kind of grounded your whole talk because I loved it so much. And there's so many dimensions to it that I want to unpack with you. It was a story about kids hanging out in the halls during class and the evolution of what you noticed, what you learned, what you ultimately did, how it was different from those early assumptions, maybe. Can you just share the story of the kids hanging out in the hall during class?
Yeah, and I think before I share that story, I want to frame it in the language that we're using, right? Continuous
Yeah,
improvement, right? And one of the things that I want to acknowledge is before we had proper nouns to describe things, we had these communal practices
exactly.
that we engaged in. And so a lot of who I am becoming, I have borrowed from some of our foremothers. And so I think about Fannie Lou Hamer, who really spent time in community with folks listening and determining what people needed, not just believing what the label was, not just believing what the visitor's description was, but like really listening to people. I'm thinking about foremothers like Elaine Brown, who was the first woman to lead the Black Panthers in Oakland, right? And who really sought to understand what community needs are. And so, as I tell these stories, one of the things I'm always doing is I'm always borrowing from the wisdom of our foremothers and really kind of thinking about, well, what would these people have done, or what questions would they have asked, or what assumptions would they discard as they sought to learn more? And as wise as I try to be, we still make these profound mistakes because I share that we have these boys and I'm in mostly seventh and eighth grade spaces.
Hmm. Yay,
And there are
middle
these,
school.
yes,
Married to
shout
a
out.
middle school educator.
Yes, a shout out to all my middle school people. But like we have these boys and they exist in almost every middle school and I can never figure them out, right? They're the ones who they come into class and they sit, they'll take out the pencil, the notebook, they'll do the thing for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And then usually about 4 minutes into class, like they'll raise a hand and they'll ask to go to the bathroom. And then those kids stay gone 35, 40 minutes,
Yep.
right? And the bathroom pass is gone. No one else can go. You're trying to figure out where are they? Where'd Kevin go? Like, like you're just like, and for us, it became worrying because we have about 4 boys in one of the cohorts that engage in this ritual regularly.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so they'll come, they'll leave. And so we've got about 4 boys who are missing 2 to 3 days of instructional time each week
Yeah.
because they're in the bathroom. And we know they're not really in the bathroom, right? We know this, right? No one stays in a public school bathroom for 35 minutes. That's just not the place to be. But they're in the hallway. And what they do is they walk down the hallway and they gather other friends. And then, so next thing you know, especially in my school, we have the end of the hallway and they're this place where the 2 hallways meet and it's just out of security cameras. So security can't see you if you hang out in that corner. The teachers can't really hear you if you hang out in that corner. And so they just hang out there and they have they have party time. But what's weird is my room is down there. And so I hear them. Right. And so I have the great professional misfortune of being the one that has to stick my head out the door, and all right, boys, go back to class. Like I'm that guy. Right.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be that guy because
Yeah.
it's hard to be that person. And so you stick
Yep.
your head out the door and those kids, they look at you, they shoot you mean looks. If they're feeling really spicy, they'll talk, like all the things, right?
Yep.
And it just became this battle. And I didn't want it to be because that's not who I want to be as a professional. Um, and um, and I was really trying to figure it out. And I remember one day almost like being near tears, not the sad tears, but like the angry tears,
Mm,
like the
yeah.
ones like, I cannot get this thing to go. I've got kids, like, again, For children, missing 3 to 4 instructional periods a week is not okay. I mean, even guys, like just doing the math. If I have a classroom of 25, one kid is 4%. And so for children, I'm looking at 16% of my class is in the hallway. That's just not okay. And so I'd gone to the health teacher about this. And he's like, yeah, I'm feeling the same thing. And then the social studies teacher, yeah, she's like, yeah, I'm feeling the same thing. And we kind of noticed the trend. They're all escaping in the first 4 minutes. And so we asked ourselves, what is it about the first 4 minutes of class that makes children want to escape? Right? Because
Mhm.
all these kids can't be quote unquote bad kids, like, right? And in educator circles, sometimes we can be quick to label. And I've learned over time that there's no such thing as a bad kid. We know this, right? That no kid comes to school as a bad kid. Parents send us their best kids, right? And so we're like, what is it about the first 4 minutes? If we were to invert the question and really kind of think about class structure, what is it that's happening in a learning environment in the first 4 to 6 minutes that's turning kids away from us and driving them into the restroom or into the hallway? And so we couldn't figure that out. So then we asked the question, well, what would happen if we rewrote the first 4 to 6 minutes of class in a way that made kids A, feel welcome, and then imbued a sense of like radical possibility? That if after the first 4 minutes, every kid felt like, oh, this is something that I can be successful at. And so that's what we did. We decided to rewrite the first 4 minutes of each class to feature activities that were social in nature, activities that were inclusive, and activities that people could feel successful at and feel this sense of radical possibility. And then we just decided to measure it. So we're like, we're going to rewrite the first 4 minutes and we're going to do that for 10 days. 10 days is 2 weeks of school time. And we're just going to see what we observe when we do that. And so we did that for 10 days. And there were 3 big observations that we discovered. The first was, of course, that more kids were in class most of the time. Like fewer kids tried to escape after the first 4 minutes. And so that was a win, like right there. That was a major win. Then
Yeah.
another thing that we discovered is that kids were more willing to share with each other. And so what was fascinating is they were less willing to share with us, but more willing to collaborate
Mhm.
with each other. And so that was an
Mhm.
interesting thing. We're like, okay, they talk less to us when we do collaborative, welcoming activities in the first 4 minutes, but they talk more to each other. And that's kind of a win. That's a learning
Yeah.
win. That
Yeah,
they're talking less to
definitely.
us and more to each other. And then the last thing that we discovered was they were more likely to actually be on time. Like, and so they wouldn't breeze in, late or tardy. I hate that word. School is the only context where we use the word tardy, and I want to do an investigation of that word at some point. That's a whole
Yeah.
nother podcast.
Yeah.
But we had these findings, and then we're like, oh, we think we discovered something. And so the 3 of us, it was me, the gym and health teacher, the social studies teacher, and then we went to go get the math teacher. And we're like, look, here's what we discovered. We discovered that if you do your first 4 minutes like this, kids are less likely to be late, less likely to escape, more likely to talk to each other. And so then she tried it. And so then there was like 4 of us who were like, we think we're onto something. And then she, because she's really outgoing, the math teacher was like, we should lead the whole staff PD and share with them what we discovered. And so then we like went to the whole school and we were like, hey, we know that all of you are probably experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing on the seventh grade hall. So here's the thing that we discovered on the seventh grade hall that we think might work for everybody. And so it was this really beautiful thing where, I think the hardest part of all that for me, there was this day where I had gone to the dentist. I had my first cavity and I had to get it filled. And my dentist is strange. So my dentist can only see me at like 9:43, like weird dentist times. And so I had to like come to school, leave school, go get a cavity filled, and then come back to school. And when I was coming back one day, I came back at this awkward time that I'm not usually in the hallway, and I ran into 6 boys in the hallway. And it was a very difficult moment because it's usually the part of the day where they have free reign of the hallway. But because I was an adult in the hallway, I kind of saw them doing their thing, and then they saw me seeing them. So it was just like a really strange moment.
Mhm.
But before I went to teacher anger, why are you in the hallway? I went to teacher inquiry, and my brain was like, oh my gosh, these aren't boys who are escaping class because they're horrible people. These aren't boys who are escaping class because they have no disregard for rules. I looked at the six of them and I was like, these are the six kids who struggle most profoundly with reading, you know? And
Hmm.
so what I realized was we didn't have a hallway problem. We had an engagement problem. We had a reading problem. But what happens in school space often is we treat the symptom and not the root cause. And
Yeah.
so what me and my colleagues were able to do, we were able to really look at what are the root causes here? What is the thing that's driving kids out of classroom space? And it is not any kind of irresponsibility or any kind of flaw. Rather, it is like, and I think this is true of both you and I, Stacey. Like both of us, I think if we were put in space in front of our peers and forced into doing things that made us feel like less than or made us feel inferior, we would escape too. And
Yeah.
so they were engaged in the real human response. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling isolated. I'm feeling like alone. I'm feeling singled out. I'm going to escape to some sense of community and safety. And so I think what I'm interested in under this umbrella of boldness, what I'm interested in is just not accepting the diagnosis that some kids are bad or that some
Yeah.
kids are disobedient or that some kids aren't built for school, that everybody is built for school. Everybody's built for learning, right?
Yeah.
Like, like, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Everybody's built
Schools
for
may not
learning.
be built for our kids, but every kid is
Yeah,
built for
yeah,
learning.
yeah. Everybody's built for learning. And so like, I I think just asking big questions and making like big attempts is
Yeah.
is the way forward, especially in 2026, where we're in this moment where there is so much debate about like the right way to go in literacy and math and special education. And people spend so much energy on the debate and very little energy on the children. And so I am
Mm,
not interested at all in debating anymore, and I am more interested in innovating in community space where the people are. Yeah,
yeah. Oh
yeah,
my gosh. Cornelius,
yeah,
there's so many things about this story that I want to like double click on and
yeah,
dig into. I mean, one of the
yeah,
things that I think is really striking, like I've written in other places about rational disengagement, how like
yeah.
when kids are disengaging, it is a rational process. They are reacting
Oh,
like in the same
absolutely.
way that you're
Yeah,
saying like we would to
yeah,
contexts where they don't feel safe or
yeah,
celebrated or like they can be successful or
yeah,
powerful. And so I
yeah,
think what I love about that moment of you like noticing the pattern, oh, it's always in the first 4 minutes, but then
yeah,
getting curious about like what's underneath that. Why is that
yeah,
happening? And
yeah,
the question, kind of putting it back on us to like, what can we do in the first 4 minutes
yeah,
that is going to help kids feel like it's possible, like they're
yeah,
powerful, and how can
yeah,
we restructure what we're doing? I just think that's such a powerful thing because we misdiagnose the problems all the time. Like I
yeah,
love
yeah,
that inside of like we don't have a hallway problem, we have a reading problem. And then
yeah,
the things you try are totally different from the things you would
yeah,
try if you're just accepting that you have a reading problem or a hallway
yeah,
problem. Um,
yeah,
so it also just makes me think about like boldness is not falling back on the same old tropes or telling yourself the
yeah,
same old story. Like boldness is being
yeah,
open to telling yourself a new story and discovering what
yeah,
that story
yeah.
is. And I would love to hear just a little bit of how do you think we can support each other to like build that muscle of looking past
Mhm.
the symptom and getting
Yeah,
to the root cause and really avoiding like jumping to solutions before we really understand the problem. Uh,
yeah, yeah. I have a very like wise colleague who refuses to let me tell just one story. And so every
mm,
time I talk to her about how the classroom is, she asks me, and this is her exact words, she always says to me, what if that wasn't the story? What else could the story be? And so if
mhm.
I come to her and I'm like, yeah, the kids keep leaving class and they keep asking for the bathroom pass and they don't like, they don't ever come back for like 35, 40 minutes. She's like, all right, put that to the side. What if that wasn't the story? Tell it again. And then I have to really think. I'm like, oh, the kids maybe feel isolated and so they leave to find community. But
Hmm.
I have to like actively not accept
Yeah.
the easy explanation or the story that's going to kid blame or the story that's going to like shift responsibility to some other place that like, and so that practice of holding each other accountable by refusing to accept the cliche story. And I
Hmm.
think in school spaces, sometimes the cliche story is that, oh, these kids aren't like they used to be. Oh, they're on their screens too much. Or, oh, they're not as respectful as they used to be last year. These are these
Yeah.
cliche things, right? And so to have a friend in the building who will never let me rest on a cliche story, I think is important. And so I'm kind of passing that forward, like naming
Hmm.
that, that's been really like powerful and it was really interesting because like and Lauren Scott is who I'm naming. She's a principal now, but as we've grown together, I always go back to that. Like that she
Hmm.
would never let me be in the same like this like cliched story. And then another thing that has been really, really helpful just for my own self-esteem and for my own sense of like well-being as a practitioner. There's so much about this historical moment that has taken power away from teachers,
Yeah.
right? We are handed scripts. Go teach the thing. You need to be on page 4 when we say you need to be on page 4. You need to be on minute 20 when we say you need to be on minute 20, right? That's disempowering, right? There's so much about this historical moment that has taken power away from teachers. And so I am really hugging the question, like, what can I do? Um,
Hmm.
in in a real way. And I think about that question in all of the nuanced ways. Like it's this idea that like I have power here, that I am not powerless. Um, Even though there are so many messages in our contemporary ecosystem that say that we are, or so many messages that say that, like, oh, well, wait to ask permission from this one, or wait to, like, and so, like, really asking that question, like, what can I do? And sitting with that question. And so, anytime I'm looking at conditions in a classroom, I'm looking at conditions in the hallway, I'm getting used to doing this in community where we just look at each other and, like, what can we do here? And we
Hmm.
just, like, don't allow ourselves, because, like, I think there's a saying, Frantz Fanon, who wrote The Wretched of the Earth and Black Skin, White Mask, and so many like really powerful like decolonial books. One of the things that he says, the last place the oppressor leaves is your mind, right? And so really kind of
Hmm.
adopting this belief that there's a thing that I can do here and I won't let that go ever. And so when I'm thinking about this moment, I'm thinking about who we are as practitioners. Those have been the practices that have really kept me um, institutionally safe
Yeah.
and kept me curious. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that we all need a Lauren in our life saying, what else might it be? Like,
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
great. Um, I want to go back to this idea that like you came up with this because you were asking what else, what can we do? What can we do? You came up with this idea that was like a bold idea. You didn't just try it once. You tried it like over 10 days with a couple trusted colleagues.
yeah,
Um, and just this idea of we don't have to tie ourselves in knots trying to do everything on a large scale right at the beginning. It's actually
yeah,
wiser and in some cases bolder to take a bold idea and start it on a small scale, recruit some
yeah,
close friends, set a
yeah,
goal you can measure simply. Essentially, you guys were asking, like, we're going to try this thing. How will we know if it's getting better? Well,
yeah,
fewer kids will be in the hallway and kids will be
yeah,
more engaged in class. Like these are
yeah,
really simple, observable things, data to
yeah.
gather. And sometimes I feel like we so overcomplicate this idea of data that we lose sight of what we're actually trying to do, which is just to know if something's working or
Absolutely,
not for our
absolutely.
kids. And
Well,
I'm curious.
Stacey,
Yeah,
yeah, it's like the idea that data has become a proper noun that is not
right.
owned by us, right? It's owned by, whoever you're paying your money to like, sit your kids in front of machines. And so they were kind of like in this very radical way taking back the idea of data that like
Mhm.
that data is things that we observe in our classrooms that we can use to inform our teaching tomorrow is really
Mhm.
powerful to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there particular pieces of that kind of data that you have found most useful in your practice, or things that you find yourself keen into
Yeah.
over and over again to know if
Yeah.
what you're doing is working?
Yeah, my favorite form of data that like I have been using recently is, and I do this religiously every day, where I will stop right when it's time to clean up, about 3 minutes before the bell. People are putting things in backpacks, and I will ask people outright, like, can you name for me one thing that worked for you as a learner today? Like, and so that's your exit question. What's one thing that worked for you as a learner, and what's one thing that absolutely did not work for you as a learner?
Mhm.
And those have become the defining questions of my practice.
Mhm.
That like what worked for you today, what did not work for you today. And I think it's really important that young people see me writing this down. And so while they're talking, like I write it down. And then tomorrow I bring it back up. I say, so yesterday, some of you named that this thing worked really well for you. So I am replicating that practice.
Mhm.
Yesterday, some of you mentioned that this thing was not working out so well for you. So I refined that part of the practice. So what you'll notice in today's lesson is we're going to do a little bit more of this, a little bit less of this. And the way that kids come to life when you name their idea in
Yeah,
public space
totally.
is arresting. It is completely like it's really, really powerful. And so, people all the time ask me, they're like, Cornelius, how come the kids listen to you? And I'm like, well, I listen to them. Yeah, listening is not unilateral, like, right? It's like it's a thing
Yeah.
that we can invest in, really. And so, but that has been, I wish I would have known to do that 25 years ago. But that has been the single most transformative thing in my practice. Just like asking kids, like what worked well for them, what about today worked really well for them, and then going home and really thinking about it. Be like, okay,
Mhm.
they told me that when they had opportunities to share their ideas in a low stakes way, that worked really well for them. And so, how do I ensure that they get opportunities to do that as often as possible?
Yeah, I love that
Yeah,
so much because I think a lot of times, even when we ask kids what's working and what's not for them, we don't always loop back to
yeah,
share, like, here's what I heard, which is
yeah,
so important because then, like you're saying, then they know you've been listening. Otherwise,
yeah,
they don't know that we've been
yeah,
listening. And so I
yeah,
just love, I mean, that's one of the things I loved about your book too. We got this. You talk a lot about listening to kids,
yeah,
like not as like this slogan or something we do like in words, but like
yeah,
as a daily practice that we
yeah,
enact.
absolutely.
And so, like, what do you have other tips for us who are
Yeah.
wanting to listen to young people in ways that
Mhm.
will change like adult thinking and decision making? Like anything you've
Yeah.
learned about
Yeah,
better?
it's kind of funny. I also worked, and I have to shout out all these people. These are all some of my like Brooklyn mentors. But I had a colleague who eventually became a principal, who eventually became a district person. But like we would have like staff meetings, and she would insist that if you're going to talk about kids, kids need to be at the table. And so we would be having professional learning, we would be having plan time, and she would always insist that like kids sat at the table with us.
Mm,
And the way that that started to inform practice was almost immediate.
yeah.
Like, because like there are things that I learned that I'm like, oh, I'm afraid to say this at the table if a kid is sitting here. And then I had to ask myself, well, should that thing be said then anyway? Like,
Hmm.
like if we're not willing to say it in front of a kid who's got equal skin in the game, like then we probably shouldn't be saying it at any planning table. It's this idea, during the disability rights movement in the 70s, there was this slogan, nothing about us without us.
Yes.
And that like I think that really exemplifies that belief that we're going to do planning here, but we cannot do it without students being at the table. Or we're going to do professional learning here so that we can be in better service to kids, but we cannot do that professional learning without students at the table. And so making that transparent has been really, really powerful for me. And so that's been a thing that has really reoriented my stance. Just having kids at the table.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to ask this question about my practice with a kid sitting here? and what does it mean then to honor their feedback or to honor how they might see a thing that has been really, really big. But then, Stacey, another thing for me, um, and I'm at the point of my career now where some of the people that were kind of like the established people in the building when I started are now starting to retire. So people that I came up with, and I'm looking around, I'm like, oh,
It's you
I'm
now.
yeah, I'm the old dude here now. And so I have spent a lot of time like listening to some of the old timers. That has been one of my favorite things to do. And I think, and I can be honest here, I think sometimes um, the way that we listen is steeped in a kind of institutional lore that leans toward the toxic, right? That sometimes when teachers get together and talk about kids or talk about practice, sometimes we lean toward the toxic. And so I have really been investigating what does it mean to listen to people's highlight reels, right? I'm a
Mm,
huge basketball fan, and we watch those old videos of Michael Jordan. They string together all the highlight reels. You watch these old videos of like Dr. J or Kobe Bryant, and they string together the highlight reels. And so I've been sitting with some of the old timers, and I just want to hear their highlight reels. Like, I mean, like, what was the year that like social studies really became the thing for you? Or can you tell me about the one field trip that really kind of changed your relationship to kids? Or can you tell me about the moment where, and so like
yeah.
those things, and people have so much wisdom. Like my fear is that as things change so rapidly in our country, right, we're watching the Department of Education be dismantled, right? And I don't fear the loss of institutions. I fear the loss of institutional wisdom, right?
Yeah.
And so I have personally been wanting to warehouse just the experience of the people who are retiring, the people who are leaving districts, and really asking the nuts and bolts questions like, how did you do that thing? So tell me
Mm-hmm.
about the one field trip that changed the trajectory, changed your relationship to kids. All right, how did you do that? How did you organize it? What did you do? Who did you ask for support? That has been some of the best professional learning for
Yeah.
me. Just allowing like people to tell their stories. And I am lucky that I'm in a position where I get to go around and talk to different people. And so that I get to like learn from people in that way. And so those are kind of my top three. Like when I find myself professionally frustrated or heartbroken, the thing that usually lifts me out of that is hearing about other people's like experiences. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I still think of when I first came to High Tech High, I spent
yeah,
the first 3 years basically the shadow to one of our founders, Rob Reardon, who's like, we refer to him as Yoda at High Tech High. I mean,
yeah,
he's like so wise and just like
yeah,
magical.
yeah,
And it was completely transformative for who I was as
yeah,
an educator, as a human, um, to spend that much time with him. And just,
yeah,
he had like hard fought wisdom over decades of
yeah,
doing this work in really different contexts that,
yeah,
yeah, it was really powerful and we can't lose.
yeah, yeah.
We can't lose that. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I have one more question
Oh,
unpacking your
absolutely.
story that's like
Yeah.
a little bit, but but I really want to ask it because one of the things you also talked about in that keynote is you were cautioning folks as you're trying something new, don't worry about getting buy-in from everyone.
Yeah.
And you said this quote, many a great idea has died on its way to consensus. And I
Yeah.
like laughed and cried when I heard this because a norm that the founders of High Tech High, Rob being one of them, kind of insisted on whenever somebody proposed a new idea or something to try was like, you don't need to do it, but you can't prevent others from doing it, was the
Yeah.
norm. And it was a way of encouraging innovation, of like giving new ideas a
Yeah.
chance. Um,
Yeah.
and, as an improver, I really embrace the power of testing bold ideas on a small scale, not burning a
Yeah.
bunch of energy and goodwill, trying to get
Yeah.
everybody on board with ideas that are like half baked, because there will
Yeah.
be failures, there will
Yeah.
be learning that needs to happen. But once we've discovered something that actually works for kids, then I want to spread that and get more
Yes.
folks on board so more kids can
Mhm.
benefit in the same way that your
Yeah.
story kind of illustrates. We started
Yeah.
with this, and then this teacher
Yeah.
got on board, and then we're doing a PD because we've learned some
Yeah.
stuff we want other people to know. But what anything else that you've learned about like how to nurture
Yeah.
ideas so they kind of
Yeah.
can get a fair shot, and then help those good ideas spread.
Yeah. I think two things, and this word is overused, and so I'm saying this with great caution. We talk often about transparency. And so I want to be really clear, like that I've really been interested in transparency, that if I want an idea to have time to grow, if I
Mhm.
want that seed to germinate, I've got to be transparent about what I'm doing. Here's what I'm doing, and here's why I'm doing it.
Mm.
But the way that I engage in transparency has shifted. I don't believe in telling anymore. I believe in showing.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so it's like, hey, Stacey, come to the room because we've been trying this thing in the first 4 minutes, and I want you to watch how some of our heavy hitters. So I'm talking about Devin, I'm talking about Sean. I want you to watch how some of our heavy hitters now engage in the first 4 minutes. And so
Yeah.
I'm no longer, hey, telling you, hey, here's the thing that we're doing, but I am like actively inviting you to the room to come experience it with me. And for me, that kind of transparency feels undeniable.
Yeah.
That like, because I'm asking you to come see the students that you care about. I'm asking you to come see them in a different context. And I'm asking you to come see them in a different light, right? And so
Mhm.
so if we want change, we can't just be descriptive. We have to be visionary.
Yeah.
That like people cannot walk toward a horizon that they can't see. And so I have become obsessed with providing vision for people, right? Because if they only have my vision to go off of, that means you got to really trust me. And I don't have that kind of intimacy with everybody yet, right?
Mhm.
But if I can show you the vision and you can see it for yourself, then we can walk together. And
Yeah.
so I am less into scriptive these days in pursuit of consensus and more into being demonstrative. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. And so I think, and that's how policy fails, right? Because policy is
Yeah.
descriptive, right? That's
Yeah.
how so much of traditional leadership fails, because so much of traditional leadership is do the thing, trust me, right? Very little of traditional leadership is invitational
Mm.
and truly visionary. Hey, come with me. We're going to go see the thing together, and then we're going to think about how we architect the
Yeah.
path toward
Yeah.
that thing. And so as I mature, I think a lot of my leadership is changing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah,
That,
that I talk way less now. Yeah, show a whole lot more.
I
Yeah,
mean, that completely resonates with me as well. I think just being at High Tech High now 18 years, we've always been kind of like, we can't just talk about it. People have to see it.
yeah,
But even in our improvement networks that we lead, like I think one of the things that's been most powerful has been it's not just like writing up your ideas, it's actually taking folks to visit a school that's
yeah,
doing amazing things with
yeah,
kids who look a lot like the kids they serve too, and
yeah.
having them experience like what that looks like,
Hmm.
and be able to unpack it together and kind of figure out
Yeah,
what does the course look like for me to for us
yeah,
to be enacting this in our setting.
yeah.
Just
Hmm.
the seeing is really and experiencing is really important.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, one of the things that I have such a deep appreciation for the ways that you and your work attend to the importance of doing this work in community. Like, a theme in
yeah,
everything you say is like, we cannot do this alone. We
yeah,
do this together. I know
yeah,
you're thinking a lot about community right now, what it means to
yeah,
you. And I was really struck in your talk how you talked
yeah,
about that, another way we are bold is collaborating and moving through conflict and disagreement because it is
yeah,
inevitable in community. And I'm going to quote you again. I just keep quoting you. I took a lot of great notes, Cornelius. Um, you said, we can be soft on people and hard on the systems that cause harm. And I'd love to
yeah,
hear from, which is a norm that we often say, like, soft on the people, hard on the content. That's like a norm
yeah,
kind of we've had for years. But what does that look like in practice to you, especially when
yeah.
change feels really personal or emotional or messy?
Yeah. There was a moment in contemporary progressive culture where in our race to brighter tomorrows, it kind of became a purity test,
Yeah.
right? I eat more whole grain oats than you do, or I do or or I work at more co-ops than you work at, or the contemporary progressive thought was kind of infiltrated by these like holier than thou sentiments.
Mhm.
And that really worried me because like I'm wildly imperfect, you're wildly imperfect, all of us. Like I eat whole grain oats and I like barbecue, right?
Yeah.
So we're also complex, right? But the same thing happened in school culture, right? Where there was this race to brighter tomorrows. And so it became this series of like purity challenges. And that just doesn't serve anybody. And so I was really thinking, I want to be really forgiving of and soft with like people, of course, like because we all have these complicated humanities, like, right? We all have these complicated identities. Um, and the problem is never the people. The
Mhm.
problem is always a system. It is a way of doing things that does not serve students, that does not serve the adults who love and educate them. But when we go and we have these conversations, if we're not careful, we end up blaming people.
Mhm.
Well, it's Stacey's fault because she believes in doing stuff on screens with kids. She had a Kahoot the other day, and if she was old school like me, or oh, it's this person's fault because they let the kids walk around the classroom and they have flexible seating, and if they were hardcore like me, those kids would be in their seats, right? And so we get in these conversations where we're blaming each other. And really, I'm like, what if that were to stop? What if we were to kind of all pause and really look at, well, what are the systems here that are preventing us from being fully human? What are the
Yeah.
systems here that are preventing students from being fully themselves and fully curious, fully present? Let's talk about those things. And so it's just a stance that I have really been thinking a lot about, especially whenever I have an opportunity to stand on a big stage in front of administrators and superintendents. Because like that's when things get really dicey, right? Like when we start having these professional conversations, people use these frameworks that we've been blessed to, use, but then these frameworks get perverted, right? So we have this Danielson framework, but now it's toxic, right? Like, so all these frameworks get and so really to say, hey, our people are all on a journey of being the best that they can be. And at various points on the journey, I'm going to show up in a lot of imperfect ways. I'm going to show up in a lot of ways that are flawed. I'm going to show up in a lot of ways that illuminate the areas where I still need to grow and learn. So I'm going to show up as a human. That doesn't mean that I don't belong in this school. Like, right? That doesn't mean that we don't belong in the school together. And so, again, how can we make space for the imperfection of the humans who attend school and work at school while being really hard on the systems that prevent those people from being the best that they can be? I think that's a relatively easy thing to do if we take the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that. It makes me think about, I mean, one of the reasons I even fell in love with improvement at the beginning was just this
yeah,
shift from like focusing on people to focusing on systems. And that,
yeah,
when we're spending all of our time in righteous judgment, blaming other folks, we're actually letting the systems just kind of continue on
yeah,
as they've always been, and we're not changing anything. It also makes me think
yeah,
about Elena Aguilar like talks about like people can't learn from you if you think they suck.
yeah,
Which
yeah.
I think
That's a
is
real
like
thing.
people can feel it when you think they
Yeah,
suck. And
yeah,
there's not really a way forward from that. So
yeah,
I just really appreciate that. Um,
yeah.
I mean, and this is kind of going back to something you mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
Um, but you talked about how like there's this balance because in loving communities, we need to tend to each other,
Yeah.
be compassionate with each other, um, not be so holier than thou that we can't like see each other as imperfect humans all doing our best. And we also need to move each other along.
Yeah.
And you talked about how, sometimes in doing this work, it can be really easy to fall in love with the pain points or fall in love with the pain and
Yeah,
spend all of our time and energy kind of
yeah,
talking about the pain,
yeah,
what's going wrong. And when you said this, when you mentioned like, sometimes we take so much time talking about the pain points, we fall in love with the pain. There were like, uh-huh, uh-huh, like across the audience. I mean, it really like people
yeah,
clearly you hit on something.
yeah,
Um, and you actually recommended a protocol of sorts. You were like, yeah, you get 2 minutes to complain
yeah,
about what's wrong. We need to acknowledge it, but
yeah,
we can't stay there. So,
yeah.
is there anything else you've learned about like how do you support people and each other, yourself, in
Yeah.
moving past the pain so we can get to that informed action?
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly it. Just like there is enough about school that's hard.
Yeah.
And so acknowledging that it's hard and then really protecting the space to do two things, to work toward better realities that aren't as hard, and then to be engaged in just joyful community with each other. Because there's also a lot about school that's hella funny. And there's a
Yeah.
lot about school that's like cute. And there's a lot about school that's
Especially middle
adventurous.
school.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a lot about school that's like weird. Like yesterday, I spent probably 30 minutes debriefing the Grammys. I don't know when this is going to air, but we are recording this on February 3rd, and the Grammys just aired this weekend.
Yep.
And so I had all kinds of like weigh-ins about wardrobe and song selection, and it was just really joyful to be in community with kids and colleagues while people talked about like Lady Gaga's song, right?
Right.
And I think everybody that knows me knows that like I absolutely adore her music. And so it was just really fun just to be around kids. Like, and so
Yeah.
to be like, yo, I can be here talking about all the things that are broken, and we're already doing that work, right?
Right.
And we're already making those sacrifices, and we are already spending the extra time and investing in kids. And so protecting the space to just like laugh together. Some of the kids were giving me wardrobe suggestions. They're like, well, if you like Lady Gaga, you need to do more of it. And I'm like, there will never be a day where I, as your educator, will wear feathers. But like, thanks for the suggestion. But that's, but that's like, it's just fun. Like,
Yeah.
and even like coming home last night, out of everything that happened yesterday at school, the thing that made me smile the most before I went to bed was just that silly conversation about like, celebrities and their wardrobe selection, and so I think those things are important. Yeah.
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 Those moments of joy and delight are also, it's like we sometimes approach them like they're a nice to have, but they're
Yeah.
so essential for young
Necessary.
people
Yeah.
and adults, like all of us moving through the
Yeah.
world and in schools
Yeah.
and to keep the good work going.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to end with
Yeah.
something that you said in your closing,
Excellent.
um, which you said in 2025, now 2026, we can move informed by our own experience. We don't have to wait for experts to tell us what to do.
Yeah.
We can innovate alongside our young people. And right
Yeah.
now, I hear, as I said at the beginning, lots of people talking about getting through, navigating. Um, and I just really appreciated that you noted there was a profound difference between moving through and boldly facing difficulty. And that moving through implies we need to just wait, hold on. It doesn't really address the reality, but boldly facing means we acknowledge the reality, but also the possibility that, in your words again, we are the architects of our experience.
Yeah.
And so, just this profound message of like, we have agency, we can be the architects. And I'm just would love to end with like, what does that look like for you in
Yeah.
2026?
It just looks like believing myself. Like, I had a soccer coach one time who was an expert. Like he used to work with like the Olympic team. He was like a certifiable like expert in soccer. And I remember one time going to him and I'm like, yo, this dude on the left side is like grimy. This guy is playing dirty. Like this guy on the left side, like we got to do something about it. And it can't just be 125-pound me. And my soccer coach, who was the expert, he's like, well, that can never happen. That's not within the rules of the game. So that's not happening. And I'm like, no, I am telling you My experience is telling you that this dude on the left side is grimy. And he was like, no, 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 that can't be. He would never do that. Like the rules of the game state you can't do that. So that would never happen. And he really had me that my experience was not correct. Like
Mhm.
my experience, my teenage expertise was saying this kid is grimy, right? But
Mhm.
my coach, the global expert, was just like, well, theoretically, that could never possibly happen, so it's not happening, right? Like, and so the plays that he was asking us to execute wouldn't work because this kid was being grimy. And I remember having a decision to make. I was like, okay, he's asking me to execute this play. My expertise is telling me that it's not going to work because I'm seeing this kid like not do what he's supposed to do. And so I have this choice between trusting the expertise of this institution or trusting the expertise of my experience.
Mhm.
And at that time in life, I was too young to understand how valuable it was to trust my own experience.
Mhm.
And as I look back on that moment now as a teacher, I recognize how many times we're asked to trust the expertise of outsiders while ignoring the expertise revealed to us by our own eyes and experiences. And so I am really trying to move to a place personally and collectively where people feel comfortable to say to themselves that this thing is happening. I see it, I feel it, I experience it, and I can do something about it alongside what the experts are saying, despite what the experts are saying, while the experts are saying, I think that that is a real important tension to continue to explore. And I've
Yeah.
yet to resolve it, right? Like, there are real moments where experts are barking things that contradict what my experience is showing me. And living in that tension is an important professional responsibility. I think ignoring that tension has gotten us to where we are now.
Yeah.
And we can't always resolve it, but just like living in it, just to be like, there is a tension here. My eyes and experience are showing me a thing that the experts on the sidelines can't see because they're all the way on the sidelines, you know? And so I think that that's just an important thing that I want to leave with people, that we will continue to feel that. And that you feel that does not mean that you're a bad practitioner. That you feel that does not mean that you're not a good employee. That you feel that simply means that you're human and that classrooms are nuanced and you are the right kind of human for a nuanced experience. If you continue to listen, if you continue to try new things, if you continue to reflect on your experience, and if you continue to work in community.
Yeah. Oh, thanks,
Yeah.
Cornelius. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
I'm really happy to be here, Stacey. Just like thank you for the work that you all are doing. It feels really, really good to have peers in this way, and to be seen and to be validated. And so, like for all of the listeners on this podcast, please know that like we see you, we appreciate you. You are getting all the virtual high fives and hugs from us. Thank you for not just your dedicated service to kids and community, but for your real like dedicated attention to your own growth. I think that that's what 2026 needs, and I'm happy to work and be a colleague alongside all of you.
All right. Thank you so much, Cornelius. We appreciate
Awesome.
you so much.
Excellent.
High Tech High Unboxed is hosted and edited by me, Alec Patton. Our theme music is by Brother Herschel. Huge thanks to Stacey Caillier and Cornelius Minor for this conversation. In the show notes, you can find links to Cornelius' work, as well as to the National Summit for Improvement in Education and the Deeper Learning Conference. Thanks for listening.